Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. With the conclusion of the NCAA Track and Field Championships, the Navy Athletics 2024 season is now over. The Mids finished up another terrific year, and we will recap some of those accomplishments in our sports update. In our deep dive segment, we actually have a returning guest who was nice enough to join us on some very short notice to give us her perspective on the outdoor track season and what it was like to be at the Division I Championships in Eugene, Oregon. I've got all that plus our question of the day and mid-watch segment coming right up, so stay with us. All right, so glad you could all join us today on Navy Sports Central. Whether this is your first visit or you are a regular listener, thanks for taking the time. Before we get into our sports update, I do have a couple of things to share with you. First of all, I absolutely got clobbered with work-related stuff last month, which pushed the podcast to the back burner for a while. So my apologies for that. That's pretty much all finished now. And even though it's pretty quiet in the yard during the summer when it comes to Navy sports, I've got some thoughts for at least 2 or 3 episodes before things crank back up in a couple of months. I also want to let you know about a new feature I think you'll really like. This podcast is hosted by a company called Buzzsprout, and they're always looking for ways to help us get and stay connected to our audience. And last month they came up with something I think is pretty cool. From now on, you'll be able to send the show a text message while you're listening. So here's how it works. When you go to the show notes, you'll see a link just above where they begin that reads, "Send us a text message." All you have to do is click on it and then type in your message. You will see a 7-digit number in the text box as well, and you're going to want to leave that in place because that's what links the text message to my podcast. Using this feature will allow you to answer the question of the day even before the show is over. In fact, I'd like to invite you to respond to this week's question using this link, and I'll be sure to give you a shout out on the next show as well. Just leave me your name and where you're from, and you'll get a mention on the next episode, which I plan to start working on as soon as I release this one. Okay, that does it for all the admin stuff. Let's go ahead and get into a quick sports update. I'm basically going to recap how most of the teams finished out the spring season, so let's start with lacrosse. The men got to the semifinals of the Patriot League tournament. They beat Loyola in the quarterfinals 12-10, but couldn't get past Lehigh in the semis. The Mountain Hawks came out on top 12-8 in that one, and then they wound up beating Boston University to qualify for the tournament. Now, for the season, the Mids finished with a 9-7 record, and they were also 5-3 in conference play. The women got all the way to the Patriot League Championship game against Loyola, and that's a team that hasn't lost a conference game in like 5 years. In fact, that was to Navy in 2019. This game was back and forth the whole way. Neither team led by more than 2 goals. Emily Messinese got Navy even at 11 apiece, with just over 2 minutes left in regulation, and then the game went into overtime. Less than 30 seconds later, it was all over with the Greyhounds scoring following a Navy penalty. It was a tough way to close out the season, but this Navy team has a boatload of talent coming back next year, and Loyola looked beatable on more than one occasion this season, so we'll see if the Mids can't turn the tables on them in 2025. In the meantime, they can be pretty proud of their 15-4 record. They are also 8-1 in league play, which included a Star Series clinching win over Army in April. Moving on to baseball, the Mids finished up a solid season under first-year coach Chuck Ristano. They were 15-10 in Patriot League play and got to the championship game, but weren't able to dethrone Army, which took the best-of-3 series to win the title for the 6th straight year. That had to sting more than a little because the Mids also fell short in a 3-game series against the Black Knights a month earlier and could not claim the final star of the sports season. But overall, I'd have to say it was a pretty decent first year for Coach Ristano, and I'm sure he's looking forward to getting that team to the next level. The Navy men's rugby team earned a trip back to the national championship against St. Mary's out of California. This time the Mids could not climb out of an early hole they dug for themselves, and they fell just short 26-22. It was a tough loss for sure, but this team really did beat expectations in my book considering how young they are. So look for the Mids to be right in the thick of things again next spring. Both the men's and women's tennis teams made it to the Patriot League Championship match this year. The men battled hard against Boston University, and the Terriers, who were the number 1 seed, eventually came out on top. The Mids had won the previous 5 Patriot League titles. The second-seeded Navy women also took on BU, and here Katie Lee fought off a couple of championship points in the third set tiebreaker and finally won it 8-6 to give the Mids their first ever Patriot League title. The team finished 24-7 overall and 4-1 in conference play, including a big win over Army. And there is one last thing I wanted to add. Obviously, swimming and diving is a winter sport, but the USA Swimming Olympic trials are set to start this weekend, and the Mids had 6 swimmers qualify. They are Matt Murphy, Juan Maura, and Michael Phillips in the 200-meter breaststroke, Jonah Harm and Patrick Colwell in the 100-meter butterfly, and Ben Irwin in the 100-meter and 200-meter backstroke. That's got to be an absolute thrill for those athletes. Murphy, Colwell, and Harm just graduated, so how cool would that be for them to wrap up their Navy careers with a personal best time at the U.S. Olympic trials? All right, the last sports update of the season is in the books, and coming up next, we have our deep dive segment where our guest will share some of her perspective while watching 4 outstanding Navy athletes compete at the NCAA Outdoor Track and Field Championships. So please, stick around. You know, one of the things I enjoy the most about doing this podcast is having the occasional opportunity to talk to some of the parents of Navy athletes. And last summer, I had the pleasure of getting to know Maura Kent. She is the mother of Nathan Kent, who is not only a wide receiver on the football team, but he's also a sprinter on the Navy track and field team. Maura joined me for an episode last August, and we had a great conversation that covered a range of topics, including how she saw her role when it came to raising an elite athlete who is pretty much training or competing for 10 or 11 months out of the year. Last month, Nathan, who just finished his sophomore year, qualified for the NCAA Track and Field Championships in the 400 meters. He was joined by Braden Presser, who qualified in the Javelin for the 3rd straight year, Brahmir Vick, who punched his ticket in 110-meter hurdles, and Josh Boamah, who qualified in both the hammer throw and the shot put. All 3 of them just graduated with the class of 2024. Anyway, Maura was in Eugene, Oregon to take it all in, and she joins us here today to share her experience. All right, Maura, thanks for joining me today on Navy Sports Central, especially on such short notice. I know we were in communication yesterday to see if we can set this up, so thank you for making the time.
Oh, absolutely. It's always an honor to recognize these athletes and what they've done. Thank you for this chance.
Yeah, no problem. First of all, I wanted to get your thoughts on how Nathan felt going into the outdoor season. I know he came off of indoors looking really strong. He was the Patriot League champion in both the 200 and the 400. So he had to be feeling pretty good from a confidence standpoint, right?
Yeah. Thank you for your kind words about how he did in indoors. It's always fun that you actually track the athletes and you're out there on our fans and family page. Thank you for that. By the time spring rolls around, Nathan's already competed for the Naval Academy in the fall football team. He's done winter indoor track. So heading into spring outdoor track season is a lot, but he loves it. And why? It's because the mids on both teams are incredible. His coaching staff for both football and track, they work together to ensure he isn't wore out, tore up, exhausted by the end of each season. He often is rested every other weekend during the winter and spring track seasons. And that allows him to stay fresh and excited. So yes, heading into the spring outdoor track season, he was ready to see how far he and his teammates could advance this season. He felt good about it.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. And by the way, for those of you who are not familiar, Maura is the admin on the Navy Track and Field Fans Facebook page, and I'm part of that group. So she and her counterparts do a great job keeping everybody up to date on what's going on with Navy Track and Field. So Maura, thank you for doing that. Okay, so in one of your posts on that page, you did a nice job on breaking down what it takes to qualify for the NCAA championships in whatever event it is. Okay, so I was wondering if you could kind of share some of that information as it relates to Nathan's events.
Yeah, sure. So actually there were 4 athletes that went to nationals. So Nathan and his 3 teammates, they had to qualify to nationals, and they went through similar rounds. Doesn't matter if you're a field or a running event, it was similar. So both Nathan in the 400 and Brahmir Vick in the 110 hurdles, they went through as runners, while Braden Presser in Javelin and Josh Boamah shot put and hammer, they went through as field events. So how's it work? First, the athletes have to attain a minimum qualifying marker time. That's just to get to the East Regional NCAA D1 Outdoor Track and Field Championships. This is held every year at the same time as the Academy's graduation and commissioning weekend. So firsties on the track and field team have to choose, right? Every year there's someone. Do I try to qualify for the NCAA D1 Nationals, or do I attend commission with all my mids, my buddies, my pals that I've hung out with the last 4 years? 2 seniors on the track and field team, they opted to take the pass, and they didn't go to the East Regional Qualifier track meet. That's okay. You got to make your choices. They participated in commission, all the hoop and circumstance. It was awesome. But there were other seniors. They chose to compete to try and earn a spot at nationals. For many of the men, field event seniors, their competitions were held on Wednesday, so they didn't have the problem the women had. Men competed Wednesday and Friday. Women were Thursday and Saturday. So for a woman to go to finals, if she was a runner, she didn't have a chance to go to commissioning. But the men in the field events, they could compete on Wednesday and move forward to graduation, unless you were a runner. For Brahmir and also Sam Keeney in the 3,000-meter steeplechase, they chose to skip the traditional commissioning ceremony. But I learned something this year. It's pretty cool. USNA, they hold a delayed graduation ceremony for athletes and others that have extenuating circumstances. So Brahmir and Sam, after they'd finished competing at the East Regional Qualifier meet, they were able to come back to the Naval Academy. They had an intimate graduation ceremony that only included 2 other mids, so 4. They had all the same key people, all the same wonderful speeches, but only 4 of them. So it was really neat to look at the pictures and see the experience. And you got to invite 50 people per graduate, and they all got to sit up close and personal. They were all the same. I mean, it was really actually different. I'm kind of thinking kind of a neat, cool graduation experience.
Right.
But for those Naval Academy track and field athletes that want to continue their season, those athletes had to run or throw a mark that was in the top 48. So they went to the East Regional. They had to get there. They had to have the best mark of running, shot, javelin, whatever. You had to have the 1 to 48 best marks. West Regional, they do the same thing. So you have the countries kind of divided. So the East region and the West region, and they hold their meets on the same day. They have the same platform of 4 days for qualifying. From that meet to advance to nationals, you have to be top 12. So only the top 12 on the East and the top 12 from the West make it to nationals per event. And when you really step back and think about it, it's like, holy cow, that's a lot of kids that didn't make it that are quite amazing athletes. And one of the throws coaches on the track team at Naval Academy, in the stands yesterday, he was sharing, he did the math, and he said only half of 1% of all collegiate D1 track and field athletes actually make it to nationals.
Wow.
It's like, I never did the numbers, but it makes sense.
Yeah. Sure
when
does.
you think about all the bowl games for football and a whole team goes to a bowl game, a lot more get to go to a football bowl game than a track athlete can make it. 24 make it to nationals per event. So once they're in Eugene, Oregon, the format of men is same as it was in the East Regional. Men go Wednesday and Friday, and women go Thursday and Saturday. So Brahmir and Nathan, they had, because they're track athletes, they had a 2-day competition format. So on day 1, all 24 athletes compete in that event. And for a running event, and let's just use those guys because there are more sprinting hurdle events, 3 heats, 8 athletes per event, only top 2 finishers. And then from each of the 3 heats, and then the top 3 fastest times make it to nationals.
Right.
For Josh and Braden, because they were in field events, they take all 24, split them into 2 flights. They each get 3 attempts. And then the 9 athletes that have the best 9 throws, they go to immediately into finals. So where for the field event guys, they were all done on Wednesday. Had Brahmir and Nathan advanced to finals, they would have been Wednesday and then Friday.
Right.
So that's how that qualifying worked.
Okay, yeah. So, yeah, that was a good piece of knowledge for me because I did not realize it was, top 48 to get to the regional qualifier. I thought it was just, okay, here's your time. If you can beat that time, you're good. But obviously that's not the case. But okay, so we're going to get into a little bit more of that later when it comes to how Nathan ran throughout the year. But I was wondering if you could share with us, when was it, recognizing that he had pretty solid times throughout the season, when was it that you realize, okay, well, he's a deadlock for at least getting to regionals because he's got a top 48 time? What meet was that in?
I don't know that you can say there's a deadlock. And the reason I say that, Carl, is every week you don't know where someone's competing. You don't know who's going to hit that PR. That there's just so much talent, and it's all the East Coast colleges, and you don't even see them. You don't know them. So you kind of track, top records, but it's like, what's the best website to see it?
Right.
So until they put that list out, so like for the East Regional D1 Division I outdoor track and field championships that they were held in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
But until that list came out, you really didn't know. You just had to wait. So like for Navy, they sent 16 men and 2 women to East Regional.
Mm-hmm.
Only 4 athletes, about 5 events left regionals and went to nationals.
Right.
The research of some of the coaches is stating that it's been since 1945 that Navy has sent athletes in 5 events to nationals.
Wow.
So you don't know until that last qualifying round, that last list comes out if your child's going to make it.
Right. You know what it would be curious to see, and there's probably someplace I can look this up, is when you look at the number of people that like move on. You said top 12 would move on to nationals, right? From the regionals.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be interested in finding out the difference in time from that 12th person to the 13th person, because that would speak to the level of talent that is obviously present, right? I mean, can you imagine? I mean, just hundredths of a second, maybe separating 12 from 13.
Yeah, I was going to say, literally, there were times when it was hundredths of a second. It was so close. Even at nationals, to go from the semifinals to finals, like in Nathan's 400, the top 3 were out there, but the next 4 to 8, they were almost like right across from each other.
Yeah.
It was like, thank goodness for a photo finish. You can go back and look at the video. It's
That's
crazy.
right. Right. And yeah, I wanted to get to that in a little bit, but just out of curiosity, how many times were we actually able to watch Nathan run this year?
My goal every year, because Nathan's a 3-sport athlete, is 1 to 2 events per sport, kind of spread it out. This year I was able to get to only 2 of his meets before nationals. Happy to get him. I don't live in the state. I don't even live near the state. So it makes it challenging. Darn it, they don't have track and football games down in Alabama. Although we do have a football game this coming fall in Alabama. I'm excited.
That's right. So let me ask you this, whether you are watching Nathan run in person or on TV, like say on ESPN Plus or something like that, as a former track athlete yourself, what goes through your mind when you watch him race? Just to kind of preface this a little bit, my son was not a track guy. He was a basketball guy. But when I watched him play, I would often try to put myself in his mind, wondering if we were actually seeing the same thing as he was bringing the ball up the court and the play was developing in front of him. Or if he's taking free throws, I'm right there going through the routine with him in my head, So when you are watching Nathan run, what sort of things are kind of going through your mind? Are you just there cheering, or are you just kind of thinking, okay, what's his strategy, or how's the race shaping up, and, stuff like that?
2 approaches. One is prayer.
Mm-hmm.
I just want him not to be injured. I want him to perform the best he can. And I want him to give God the glory for what he does. I don't want it ever to be, oh, look at me, I'm this great athlete. It's his, it's his relationship with the Lord, but he's got to give God the glory for what he's doing. And that's where I see when I'm thinking about his races, it is, I am learning as a parent to ask questions, as we go into the race. Do you want to talk? Do you want space? Can I ask questions? Do I wait till later?
Right.
And so I've learned to ask those questions up front so I don't get in the way. So, as an athlete, he doesn't get to hang out with mom before he races.
Mm-hmm.
I don't usually see him until after the last event is done at a track meet, and then he can come up in the stands. So it's just, just God. Give it to God. Wish him the best that he can be,
mm-hmm.
and see what happens.
Right. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take a short break now, but before we do that, I did want to give you all a couple of ways to stay up to date on Navy sports. The first is to join the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page. I've got a link to that in the show notes. Just click on it, answer a couple of questions, and you'll be good to go. The second way takes even less time. Just hit the follow button on whichever platform you're listening to this podcast right now. It can be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. It doesn't matter. Once you do that, every episode will be downloaded to your directory when it's released, and you can listen to it whenever you're ready. So please consider becoming a member of our group, and you can actually tap that follow button right now to show your support for the podcast. I'm looking forward to having you join us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, and today we're joined by Maura Kent, whose son Nathan recently competed in the 400 meters at the NCAA Outdoor Track and Field Championships. Okay, Maura, now I wanted to go ahead and get to Championship Week. And anyone who follows track and field knows that Hayward Field there in Eugene is like Madison Square Garden is to basketball in the pros, right? So I just want to kind of get a sense from you as to what that atmosphere was like when you have all these colleges converging on that, basically the mecca of college track and field.
Yeah. So track spectators, they support everyone. Typically, when you come into a track meet, you might have a favorite. Maybe I like the hammer, or I like the long jump, or I was a hurdle person, when I was younger. But they clap for everyone. That's what I love about track and field. When the kids come around, everyone's celebrating. When that last one comes around, everyone's clapping them in. It's not like what I've experienced on some of my kids in some other team sports where you've got negativity or bullying or you're just like, ick. You don't get that with track. Mm-hmm. People are awesome and dynamite, and it's really a nice experience there.
Yeah. That's the kind of feeling that I get when I'm watching, and especially when you catch it on the weekends when everything is kind of, actually, starting on Friday when everything's kind of coming together in all the finals races and stuff like that. It's really, really exciting to watch. And again, a lot of it just has to do with the location because of how famous it is and that sort of thing. So, and I know you had mentioned earlier that you don't get a chance to see Nathan a lot before a meet, obviously, but do you have a sense for what his pre-race routine is in terms of, how he gets ready, how he prepares, what music he listens to? I'm always kind of curious about that sort of thing. So I didn't know if he shared that with you.
What's really nice this year is we had 2 throwers and we had 2 runners. Mm-hmm. So they had a buddy to warm up with. So they typically, when they get off the plane, if there's time that evening, when they get to their designated site, they try and do a shakeout workout. My observation of listening to the athletes and talking with them, they do that's what they call as a shakeout. Mm-hmm. And they get out and they, Coach Cook has trained them well. They know what they need to do, and they get their stride ins and they do it at this stage in the game. You got it or you don't. Nothing's going to change making you faster. You got it or you don't. Right. So you have your routine, you go through it. Nathan doesn't always wear a headset. He has some music he does enjoy hearing, but he's just, they're in their head, right, preparing and thinking for it.
Okay. So let's get to the race itself. I remember tuning it in and just watching how everything lined up. Now, in that particular race, the 400, lane 1, I believe, was open, and Nathan had lane 2, which, even though I'm not a track guy, I know that, running on those first 2 inside lanes isn't optimal. But one advantage is, okay, I can see basically everybody in front of me here. So, that's something anyway. So after the starter's gun went off and the race started to develop, based on what you know about how he runs, did everything kind of play out the way you thought? I'm really kind of curious to get your take because for my money, and again, I just wanted to say up front that I'm not an expert in track and field, but I've been following it a long time as a fan. And certainly the quarter is one of my favorite races. And one of the things I noticed was that that last straightaway, he stayed strong all the way through to the finish. And I think that when I saw that time come across, and we'll talk about that in a second, it was 45.85, I said, okay, 4th place in the heat. Granted, there's 2 heats to go, but who knows? That might hold up. We'll see. But I just was pretty impressed with the fact that, A, he was not intimidated by anybody that was out there, and B, it was a strong rush to the finish line to the point where he was able to, kind of get his chest in front of those other guys that were right there arriving with him.
Yeah. To address your first question about lane 1 empty, you were right. It's a 9-lane track, and for the semifinal sprint heats, they left lane 1 empty, and then they ran lane 2 through 8. And lane 2 and lane 9 are really the most difficult lanes in the 400. Either lane 9, you're busting your butt. Oh, no one's going to catch you because you have no idea how they're coming from behind. Right. Or lane 2, it feels like you're chasing everybody. Right. I mean, in reality, it's the same distance, but it's still challenging. And as crazy as it is, the fastest 400-meter runner in the world is a sophomore at Georgia. Mm-hmm. He was in both of Nathan's qualifying heats at the East Regional, and he was in Nathan's qualifying heat here in Eugene. Mm-hmm. So it's like, darn, only 2 people going. I got the world's fastest 400-meter runner in my heat. So guidance from Coach Cook was go as fast as you can and hold on. So Nathan did. He caught stagger on lane 3, almost at the top of the first curve. Right. And then those 2 kind of battled back and forth. I was sitting, so where the 100-meter start was, I was maybe 20 yards past that. And so they come around that last curve into the straightaway. They got 100 meters left to run. I'm thinking, oh, he's like 7th or 8th. And he, like you said, he just powered through and he finished in 4th. He finished, like you said, 45.85, 1600ths of a second off his PR. It ended up being the number 3 spot on the top 10. You know, USNA's been tracking their track results for over 100 years. So it's number 3. But what was really cool, I was looking at it, he displaced Michael Green's time with 45.99 that was set in May 1987.
Yeah.
That was 37 years ago, or 17 years before Nathan was born. So, I mean, it's so neat to look at those records and say, these guys have been fast and jump far and throw far for a long time. So to make the record boards, just like, wow.
Yeah. It was pretty amazing. And we'll talk about some of these other top 10 times here in a second, but certainly that brought an end to his racing season, specifically as it relates to college. But I understand from speaking with you yesterday that there might be more racing opportunities. Could you kind of share some of that info with us?
Yes, I can. So the way you qualify, so this is a year the not the Junior Olympics, goodness, these guys are all adults now. the Olympic trials and in the Olympics in Paris. So who doesn't want to go to the Olympics, right? But just like qualifying to the NCAA Division I Nationals has a process you have to go through, so does the Olympic trials. So to get to the Olympic trials, you have to have the mark, you have to have the time, but then you also have to have it within a certain standard. So you have 4 mids that competed at nationals, but you also have Zaz Gourmet, who just missed going to nationals, but he's met the standards. So what are the standards? There's 2 qualifying marks. One is called the minimum. You hit that minimum, you're making Olympic trials. It doesn't matter how many qualified minimum you make. It's darn fast. It's like most of your professional athletes, the ones that are out of college, those are the ones that are making the minimums, but there are a few collegiate athletes that have. But then they have this other mark, which is our happy place. And that's called the qualifying standards. And all 4 of the guys who are at nationals, plus Zaz, have met the qualifying standard. But this is how it works. In the men's running races, they only take 35 athletes.
Okay.
In the throwing events, so for Josh and Braden, only 24 make Olympic trials.
Okay.
So now what you're doing is you're sitting on a bubble, and it's that waiting game, right? So to get to the Olympic trials, to ideally extend your season, you have to be in the top 35 or top 24. So they're in the process of doing the application. The deadline for anybody in the United States, got to be a citizen, check all the boxes, is June 11th. Then you have this thing called declare. You look at all the people that have entered your race. Maybe you're like one of those phenoms. You've qualified in 2 or 3 events, but do you think you can do that at the Olympic level? Maybe you only want to do 1 or only want to do 2. So you have to declare. That declaration date closes on June 13th.
Wow. Okay.
Olympic trials are Friday. They start Friday, June 21st.
Okay. So
between the 13th and the 21st, the United States will make that decision. The Olympic Committee, who they're going to take in those numbers. They got the inside skinny and all that. So our guys, in the meantime, they have to keep training. So Zaz and Nathan didn't graduate. The other 3 guys have graduated.
Right.
Zaz and Nathan, they still have the military duties. They still have the other training they have to do.
Right.
Nathan is a football player. All NCAA Division I football players, they have to take summer school at the school. So he's got to do that. So that's kind of where he's at. But how exciting would that be to have Josh, Braden, Zaz, Brahmir, Nathan all represent the Naval Academy at the Olympic trials?
That would be something.
That'd be just a happy place. Happy place.
For sure. Okay, so recognizing that that's still a possibility, I wanted to get your take on how the year finished versus what both your expectations were and Nathan's expectations were at the beginning of the outdoor season, okay? Because I'm looking at his track record here, no pun intended. But just a stellar year. I mean, 200, 400 meter champion against Army, 200, 400 meter champion in the Patriot League Championships, both indoor and outdoor. So was that something that he saw coming or you saw coming? Or, I mean, certainly you always want to perform your best. But here we've got a young man who's just finishing his second year at a pretty demanding institution, and his name is already scattered all over the record books. What was Nathan's take on how track season went, and what was yours?
I don't know an athlete out there that doesn't want to be the best they can be.
Certainly.
And everyone wants to cross that finish line in first. There is some really good talent, both on the academy that go against Nathan. Mm-hmm. Nathan trains. There are a couple of really good 400 meter runners right there on the academy team that push him hard. And you don't know from week to week, meet to meet, which one's going to cross that finish line first.
Right.
They're that good. They're that close together. So yeah, he absolutely would love to be first and everything. He wanted to go to finals this year at nationals, but he made it to nationals. Last year, he just made it to finals at the East Regional. This year, he went a step further and he made it to nationals. So the goal is, okay, I've been here, done it, seen it. Now, next year, let's see if he can be on the podium. Can he make it happen next year at nationals?
Right.
But yeah, what did we think at the beginning of the outdoor? Anything can happen. You don't know. You don't know who the new recruits are at the other schools when you start up. You don't know who's going to get injured, what's going to happen. There's so many variables in track.
Right.
I'm grateful he's not hurt. I'm grateful that he's ending the season well, and I look forward to see what his what they call them, second class.
right.
Next year at the Naval Academy, how that's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've been talking about the 400 meters, and you'd mentioned there's other athletes who really push him in practice.
Yes.
I was looking specifically at the group of athletes that Nathan ran his 4x400 meter relays with. At the NCAA East Region qualifier, he ran the 4x400 with Pete DeJong, Jay Evans, and then Zaz, who you just mentioned before. And they posted the best time in program history for the 4x400 with a time of 3:04:59. Mm-hmm. That was actually about 2 seconds better than the previous best time that this same group set about a year ago. So he's got all those guys coming back with him.
There's another one.
Go ahead.
David Walker is an incoming plebe this last year, and he is solid. He has a very good chance in the 400 hurdles and the open 400. And he ran a couple different times on the 4x4 also. So there are 5 that are going to be back next year.
So there's another opportunity for qualifying, right? I mean, as a relay team.
100%. So that's a really good point you brought up, because actually their 4x4 at the East Regional meet took 14. And remember, only 12 go to nationals. Mm-hmm. However, that same time, had they ran it on the West Regional meet, they would have beat 3 or 4 teams and they would have gone to nationals.
Oh, man. Wow.
It just is. There were some solid teams on the East Regional relays that they were going up against.
Yeah, that's crazy how things work out sometimes. So let's go ahead and stick with this theme of best times for a minute. Right now, if I look at the Navy records, the top 10 Navy records, it looks like Nathan has 4 of the top 10 200-meter times outdoors. And then he's got right now the second and third fastest times in the 400, both of which were set. Well, one of them was just the other day, and then the other one was set, I believe, at regionals. But the thing that caught my eye, Maura, was when I looked at the 100-meter time outdoors, I'm going, wait, what? Nathan's name was at the top of the list there. When did that happen? And how did it even come to the fact that he ran that 100? Because I've always known him as a Michael Johnson type of sprinter, 200 and 400, 400-meter relay, that sort of thing.
He actually doesn't get the chance to run the 100 very often. There's not a limit in the number of events you can compete in, but there's wisdom in the coach, and especially if there's trials and finals, you can't put a kid in too many, they're not kids, a mid into too many events. But in my background, looking at what he's done, he used to be an 800-meter runner. Mm-hmm. So I asked him, even at nationals, are you going to run the 800 again? Mom. So he does like the shorter races. He enjoys the 100. Cook is amazing. Coach Cook has really worked on his turnover and the speed. And I like to see him succeed. A 100-meter school record, that wasn't something I was even thinking about, because like you said, I saw more as a 2.4 and even an 8 guy.
Right.
So it is really cool that he was able to drop that in.
Wow. Okay, so I think that covers everything, Maura. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you want to get out there, just in terms of the experience you had and everything?
I just want to thank all the parents because the Your Mid is My Mid is alive and real in the world of track and field.
Mm-hmm.
With any sport, with any activity that happens at the academy, we can't get everywhere. And I think that's the hardest thing for us as parental units. We were used to watching our kids and going to their stuff, and you can't.
Right.
Even at the East Regional, 2 of the kids that were competing had younger siblings graduating from high school.
Mm-hmm.
Their parents had to choose. Do I go to my other child's high school graduation, or do I go to the East Regional meet where my kid might be done with the season and may not even advance to the next round? You just can't be everywhere.
Yeah.
And I can't thank the parents enough. Grab Nathan up, take him out to grab a bite to eat, or get a smoothie, or whatever it is. This is a really great community.
Mm-hmm.
It is not just about my child. It's about everyone's child. And these kids, they're better for it. And the coaching staff, from the personal trainers, the athletic trainers, I guess I should call them correctly, the coaches, they're committed. They care. And as Nathan basically ran out of his shoes.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of East Regional, his shoes were tearing. He needed a new pair of shoes. And it's like, I don't know if I even have time to order them and get them here. And Devin, the hurdle coach, goes, I got a pair, and spotted Nathan a pair of shoes. He didn't have to do that, but he did. And so it's just that total care of each other. It's really awesome.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, I did see Devin Allen interviewed right before Brahmir ran, and he kind of, he gave him a nice shout out to both Brahmir and Nathan before their races. So that was cool that he shared that. And
that is neat. I hadn't seen that interview. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, Maura, that about does it for us. Listen, again, I want to thank you so much for turning this around so quickly. We spoke less than 24 hours ago, and I'm just glad we were able to bring everything together. Again, congratulations to you and your son and to the entire track and field team, the coaches and the staff on a fantastic year. And I'm looking forward to seeing Nathan and his teammates compete again next year.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what the next year holds. Let's see what the Olympic trials holds.
Yeah, for sure.
It would be awesome to see these 5 make it.
Yep. All right, Maura, you take care now.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, coming up next, we've got our question of the day and our last mid-watch segment of the sports season. So stay close. Before I get into the question of the day, I did want to make sure I wrapped up the discussion on the track team and the 4 guys who competed at the national championships. Both the men and the women did repeat as Patriot League champions. And then individually, Nathan Kent won the 200 and 400 meter titles. Brahmir Vick was the champion in the 110 meter hurdles. Braden Presser took first in the javelin, and Josh Boamah beat everyone to win the discus, hammer throw, and shot put. And at nationals, Boamah picked up an All-American honorable mention in both the shot put and the hammer throw, while Kent, Vick, and Presser took second-team All-America honors in their respective events. So it was a great way for these athletes to finish out the year. Now, on to our question of the day, but first let's go back and check the responses to the last one, which was from our conversation with Navy baseball hitting coach Jeff Kane. The question was, how many times has the Navy baseball team won the Patriot League Championship since joining in 1991? Is it A, 2, B, 3, C, 5, or D, 6? Okay, so half of you who responded went with C, 5 titles, and the rest were split evenly at 25% between A and B, which was 2 and 3 championships respectively. Nobody wound up choosing D. And it turns out that D, 6 titles, is actually the correct answer. The Mids won their first Patriot League crown in 1994, and then they followed that up with back-to-back championships in 1998 and 99. Since then, they've won 3 more times in 2002, 2011, and 2016. So we're looking at what will be 9 years since their last title when next season starts. And you know that ending that streak is going to be a primary goal from day one. All right, now let's get to this week's question. Here we go. Braden Presser was just named an NCAA All-American in outdoor track and field in the Javelin for the 3rd straight year. When was the last time someone from the men's track team earned this distinction of qualifying as an All-American for 3 consecutive seasons in his event? Was it A, 1947, B, 1976, C, 1983, or D, 2012? Go ahead and spend some time on that and let me know what you think. And by the way, this would be a great opportunity to respond by sending us a text message, especially if you don't happen to be a member of our Navy Sports Nation Facebook group. So give that a try by going to the show notes and clicking on the link, and then you can just type in your answer into the text box and hit send. If you want to include your name and where you're from, I'll be happy to give you a shout out on our next show. And of course, I'll also post the question of the day on our group Facebook page. Okay, now let's wrap things up with our last mid-watch segment. And I will tell you that both athletes that we were tracking ended up having terrific seasons. First, we'll go ahead and take a look at Brahmir from the Navy baseball team. He led the mids in two key categories with a .345 batting average and an OPS of .981. His slugging and on-base percentages were a team best also. In one of his best games of the year against Lehigh, Murtha went 3 for 3 with a home run and a double while knocking in 6 runs. The Mids ended up winning that game 12-2. Murtha also did a terrific job fielding his position at second base. He posted a fielding average of .985, which was good for second on the team. He just finished his sophomore year, so Murtha's got a couple more seasons to have a really big impact on the Navy program. And with the talent he's got around him, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect that the team will be challenging Army again for the Patriot League title next season. Now, let's check in with Emily Messanis from the women's lacrosse team. She finished out the year as the leader in goals with 68, and she tacked on 18 assists, which also earned her the top spot in points with 86. Besides that, Messanis was second on the team in draw controls with 64. She had an excellent game against Loyola in the Patriot League Championship game, scoring 5 goals on just 8 shots. And when you look at how her game has developed over the last 2 seasons, I get the sense that her final year at Navy could be a memorable one. And by the way, I did want to mention one more thing before signing off. Regarding the talent on this team, Navy's top 7 goal scorers in 2024 were responsible for 87% of the offense, which is pretty incredible. They produced 261 of the 300 goals that the Mids had. And every single one of those players is coming back next year. That's going to do it for this edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, if you like what you've heard, please be sure to hit that follow button wherever you get your podcasts. And remember to get the word to all the other Navy fans out there. Once again, I'd like to thank Maura Kent for joining me today. It was so great to have her back to share her perspective on the NCAA championships. And congratulations to her son Nathan for his fantastic season on the track. Our question of the day continues to be a show favorite. You can get in on that by joining the Navy Sports Nation group Facebook page and giving your answer to this week's question. You can also respond by sending us a text. All you need to do is click on the link in the show notes. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use the music from thousands of artists around the world, and those featured in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.